Hello, everyone. So today we have Shell Black. Shell is a Salesforce OG, and to brief his journey, he started in leadership roles at CompUSA, Gateway, FedEx, and before transitioning into Salesforce in 2005, which was probably 6 years after Salesforce was founded, pretty early. So he spent nearly 20 plus years, 2+ decades in Salesforce, which is, I think, a big milestone. He's founder of shellblack.com, a top tier consulting firm specializing in financial services cloud, and it is trusted by RIAs, banks, and insurers. I will let Shell talk about RIAs next when we take a deep dive into financial services cloud. Apart from that, Shell is not just a business centric CEO. He knows Salesforce in and out. He's 7x certified, 6 times Dreamforce speaker, and an MVP Hall of Famer. Welcome, Shell.
Abhinav, thanks for having me. When you say that I've been doing Salesforce for 20 years, you make me feel a little old.
No, it's some maturity and experience which is coming here. So really big number, man, for Salesforce.
Yeah, it's been quite the journey.
True. So I think that's where we can maybe start the conversation. You have been in ecosystem since 2005, and you have been with FedEx and other brands. What was the initial churn from FedEx to Salesforce? Salesforce must be pretty unknown at that time, 2005, right?
Yeah, I actually had just lost my job at FedEx, and I connected with one of my old business mentors back from the CompUSA days, and he had started a Salesforce consulting practice. So like everyone, started networking, connected with my old boss, and he says, "You should really see what we're doing. This is pretty neat." And he introduced me to Salesforce. I had never seen it, but it blew my mind. And you got to have to remember back in 2005, there was such a divide. You could either do a business process and a big, huge corporate IT system, and you got what you got, and you couldn't customize it. And customization was a huge capital expenditure. And then the rest of the business was just making spreadsheets, right? And just running every other business process they could out of a spreadsheet. And then you see Salesforce, it's web-based. You can configure it literally live, and you can run analytics, refresh the screen, and you've got a dashboard showing new numbers. And that was such a game changer. That was so exciting. I had never seen anything like that. And today we take it for granted, SaaS software. But you got to remember back in corporate America, that was a big deal. Whether it was, as a small business, small businesses couldn't afford tools like that, IT systems. And so or even if you were a department manager, right? You couldn't build something on your own. It was just well beyond your skill set. So it was just so different and so fun. And I think the Salesforce's growth, I'm going to actually look back on some of the stats, but it was just fun because Salesforce was growing, the products were growing. There's a lot of acquisitions, and really, it was just such an exciting time, those early days.
And the interesting part is, as you said, like I'm starting my career in those time. I started in 2004. That time I was in Java. So configuring database was a crown and jewel kind of thing. Like you write XML files, you create SQL scripts. And when I got in touch in Salesforce, I think mine was pretty late, near 2008 and 9. So it was very awkward feeling. You created some object and it went live, and you can just have all the forms and things ready. So big transition.
Absolutely.
Perfect. So now let's fast forward. So if we come down to 2010, and I think your majority business, probably 75% is in financial services cloud. So how did that happen? I think in 2010, there was no financial services cloud.
Exactly. So in 2010, again, you have to kind of remember where Salesforce was back then. They had just broke $1 billion in revenue. Now I think their last earnings call, they were about 38 billion now. So it's incredible growth. But there was only 3 products back then. It was Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, and back then it was Communities, which is now Experience Cloud.
Right.
And you could be pretty dangerous on those 3 products because they were still maturing very quickly. But, you and myself and a lot of others, we had, completely absorbed ourselves in this product for years and years and years. And you could get really good back then. You could have a lot of knowledge, coverage, and surface area of the product. Now it's pretty much impossible because there's just, we've had 60 acquisitions, right? So it's a much different landscape now. But back then you could be pretty darn dangerous and know a lot about Salesforce. I started as a generalist. I was a solo consultant. A lot of people know the story, but shellblack.com was my personal blog where I was talking about things I'd done with Salesforce and kind of tips and tricks. And I was trying to connect with the community, and it turned into a business. And it wasn't, I didn't launch the website to be a business. It was just a way to
Oh, that's
just
a
like any
news
kind
from
of
you. So
personal
it
blog.
started as a blog.
Yeah, it was not a business. It was literally me putting a shingle out there, and I was trying to connect with other people in the community. And the community back in 2010 was a handful of people on Twitter and some pretty good personal blogs.
True.
And so I went and launched shellblock.com, bought the domain in one summer, and put up a really bad looking website and started blogging and tips and tricks and things I'd figured out as an admin, things I'd figured out as a consultant. And what had happened was people started reaching out to me and said, "Hey, I read your article. I have kind of the same problem. Maybe I'm a new vice president of sales and I need you to rework my sales process." And so I started moonlighting, and that just snowballed. And I was just doing stuff myself that first year. But by 2011, I still had a full-time job, and I had 3 contractors working with me because I couldn't keep up with all the demand, and it just snowballed from there. And then 2012, I went full-time because at that point I realized I had actually a business going and I needed to cut over talking about financial services. So that was kind of how I started.
But yeah, Ashal, I think I will take a break here. How come you came into blogging? Like typically people are lazy, don't like to write a good quality content. It takes a while. So is it like before Salesforce or it started with Salesforce only?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was FOMO, fear of missing out, FOMO. Um, my old boss would never send me to Dreamforce, and I was just felt like I was missing everything, and I wanted so bad to kind of connect and keep learning. I mean, I was just starving for knowledge with Salesforce. I was so into it, and I was just trying to connect, and I was trying to get, you know, interaction with other people in the community, and that's how it started. And when I first started blogging, I was horrible at it. I was not good. I think over the first, say, 6 years of shellblack.com, I put out over 100 blog posts. The more you do it, the better you get, right? Your
True.
brain, it really takes a while for you to kind of get your inner voice and know how you want to communicate. And it becomes a lot easier with time. But the early blog posts that I did are pretty embarrassing, but they definitely got better over time. And then the other thing I was trying to do with the community, and you probably know this as well, is that this is all pre-Trailhead, by the way,
True.
is I put out a video series on YouTube called Shell Black Whiteboard, where I was explaining
Oh,
concepts.
right. I remember you typically in blue shirt and that thing.
Oh yeah, you got to have the uniform. That's what I
Right.
call it, the Mr. Rogers uniform. Um, and I would just explain the things that I would explain to my customers all the time, like how does lead conversion work? What's a custom object? How does automation work? How does security work? And I'd also been actually, when I was working for that other consulting company back in 2005 and 2006, I actually taught the 5-day admin class for Salesforce. So I kind of knew the admin content. So that was the start of Shell Black Whiteboard from a concept standpoint. And I was just trying to find my voice and my channel, and I was trying to find something that someone else wasn't doing. I mean, there's plenty of people on Answers, there's people on Twitter, and I just took a gamble and, found a video technical school that was near my house, talked to them and said, "Hey, this is what I want to do. I don't have any money," because I was bootstrapping the company. And I had students of this technical school film my series. And that was one of their
So good.
projects. And that's how that came about. But I would show up on a Saturday or a Sunday and I would shoot 6 videos one after another, just as fast as we
Okay.
could to try
And
to
which
keep the
year
cost
was
down.
it that like you started blogging and then video
Um,
and which years?
I think the Shell Black Whiteboard was early MVP days. So I want to say it was 2013.
Okay.
So pretty early, probably 2 or 3 years into shellblack.com. And I cranked out about 30 videos. It's had over 2 million minutes watched, and it was a really good admin resource before Trailhead. Once Trailhead hit, traffic died. But
Right.
pre-Trailhead, it was really doing well. It was quite amazing. I would go to Dreamforce and someone would just run up to me and go, "You're the whiteboard guy." Yes, I'm the
Right.
whiteboard.
Right.
but
Right.
that
No,
was
I
the
I suddenly strike that thing. I totally missed that in my set of questions I was supposed to ask. Now I remember that thing very
oh,
vividly. That whiteboard
it,
thing.
it was
So.
it was what I was known for those early
Right.
days, right, in the community. But kind of circling back to the financial services question,
Hmm.
I was a generalist. I had, well, let me take this pause. I had worked for a lender for 4 or 5 years before I started showblack.com. So
Hmm.
I knew a little bit of the language and the vernacular of that. And I could talk financial services a bit. I'm not saying I'm a total expert. But around 2015, right when Financial Services Cloud launched, I could tell Salesforce was finally going to get serious about industry verticals, and acquisitions were on a tear. You've had 60 plus acquisitions, but they were still probably, I don't know, 25, 30 plus in acquisitions at that point. And I knew that if I was to grow a company, there was no way I could be everything to everybody. I thought, well, we could be average at everything or we could be really good at something. And, my little bit of background with financial services, and I kind of looked at my portfolio of clients, and we had some domain expertise in financial services that said financial services cloud is new. Let's jump on that, kind of like AI today. Maybe you want to make your stake in AI. And we went all in, and it kind of scared my team because we had customers in not every industry, but so many different industries, deep sea oil exploration and fractional jet ownership and construction and just all these crazy businesses. So it was really hard to put out on the website that says, no, we don't do anything but financial services. And it has a snowball effect. So today, you said 75%, that's a little bit of an older stat. It's like 95% of my active clients, and I define an active client is someone that I've actually invoiced in the last 365 days. But if you look at my portfolio today, 95% of our clients are in financial services. So once we put the stake in the ground, once we did more and more financial services projects, our knowledge increased, our case studies increased, and you had more references, and it just became a lot easier, right? To just, when you're on a call with a prospect and then they know instantly, what they do.
Right, right. And one thing which we all might have faced is you decide a vertical and you suddenly get bombarding of other clouds and other industries, and it's tough to stay focused there. Have you faced that kind of situation?
Absolutely. We're dabbling in AI right now, and we're trying to figure out how much energy and resources to put into it. Right? We know Salesforce is all in, but and we've looked at other. We're actually on the App Exchange. We have a connector for Salesforce to financial custodian, which is a wealth specific product. So we're
Okay.
finally on the App Exchange. For years, I said we're not going to be on the App Exchange. It's going to be a big distraction. We're not going to do it. And then someone came to us and said, "I want you to build a product." And I was like, "Okay." So now we're on the App Exchange. But for a long time, I've been very resistant to dilute the resources that we have and try to build up multiple sub practices. Today, Salesforce is super mature, and I call it the checkerboard. Like when you're playing checkers and chess. So if you think of one axis is how big is the company, and the other axis is the industry. Salesforce has a dozen or 2 dozen partners for every square
Industry
on
and
the
vertical.
checkerboard.
Yeah, true.
So it's so hard to get Salesforce to consider you for a new product or service or a new industry. We're very dominant in wealth management. We've done 30, 40 banks. We've done 50 insurance companies. But for me to go to Salesforce and say, I'm going to be your next largest banking partner, I'd have to throw a lot of money, and I'm talking hundreds of thousands of dollars at Salesforce to get their attention, to convince them that I can now be the dominant player in another square of the checkerboard. It's the checkerboard is full. So you really have to think about, not only from a resource standpoint, but from a capital standpoint, what's it going to take to get Salesforce's attention, because Salesforce is so mature and the ecosystem is so mature.
The accelerator point. So I think the App Exchange journey sort of is related to that as well, right? Like you are building so many accelerators, and then you decide that one of the thing is solving problem for so many customers. So why don't we take it forward to the App Exchange? Was that the journey for you also?
Well, we have on our website, we have a products tab, and we have about 5, I'll call them widgets, little plugins for Financial Services Cloud. So that's kind of one group, non-app exchange that's not monetized through the app exchange. And those solutions were basically use cases from customers in the wealth management industry that we were solving over and over and over again. And we just realized that it was just a common need. Maybe it's just a usability gap of Financial Services Cloud. And maybe one day some of those products will be, obsolete because Salesforce will address the gap. But instead of doing custom development, which is very expensive to solve that use case, what we had said is, look, we'll package this up. It's a private app that we can deploy in your org, and we can give you this feature at a fraction of the cost if we did custom development. And so we have the Shell Black accelerators that are Financial Services Cloud kind of enhancements. We have an implementation accelerator, which is totally different. And then we have an app exchange solution. So the app exchange solution is a company called Bridge FT came to us and said, we've got clients that are using our service that are on Salesforce. And let me explain what Bridge FT is. So Bridge FT is a custodian. So if you make if you're a wealth management firm and you're doing a trade, you have to go through a custodian, Fidelity, Schwab, Pershing, and Bridge FT is an aggregator of all that data. So if you do business as a wealth firm with multiple custodians, like a Schwab, a Fidelity, a Pershing, Black Diamond, whatever, they aggregate all that data so they only have one integration point. So we built an integration between their system and Salesforce. So as a wealth manager, I can be in Salesforce, pull up my client, Shell and Allison Black, and then I can see all the financial accounts and they're rolling up. So I can see at a glance, what's the monetary value of that relationship? How much money have I invested for this relationship? So it's just a nightly feed that uses 2 or 3 different keys and matching logic. We can bring that in. You can go to the app exchange and buy that as a subscription service. But Bridge FT wanted to sell their product to more Salesforce customers, and Salesforce customers, didn't want to have a separate system. So Bridge FT approached us to fill that gap. Hopefully that makes sense.
True, true, true. And I was still processing that you mentioned different accelerators for different things. One is for implementations, and probably at times these accelerators are good for smaller ticket size customers who don't have a big budget for implementation. So they probably solve 70-80% of their use cases, and you don't have to charge a big fee, a reasonable cost. And
You are spot on. That's the whole reason that we developed that product. When you're working with a small wealth firm and they're moving into Financial Services Cloud, it's hard to be consultative because, for a bigger firm, we would sit down and say, tell us about your business, tell us about your processes. When you work with a smaller firm, they have very few processes. They're very small. Everybody does everything. And when we ask that question, the number one answer we get is, we don't know what the best practice is. We just want what everybody else has. We're assuming that if we hire you, you can
you
tell
tell
us how we
us.
should do this.
Right,
And that's what it came
right.
about. And so, Salesforce will bring us in to smaller clients. Unfortunately, when they're smaller clients, they're kind of a one and done. Once you do the implementation, they just don't have the revenue to do big IT investments year 2 and year 3. So it's really kind of a 1-year relationship with maybe some ongoing support. And so the whole point of the accelerator, I call it the greatest hits collection, right? So we've worked with over 400 firms in the wealth management space at this point. We know how they work. We know what fields they want. We know what a good page layout looks like. We know what a typical wealth advisor dashboard looks like. And we know how to train them. We know how to train in their language. And so it is not a
Right.
consultant product. It's a prescriptive product. It is literally, we're going to get your access to your, and we are going to set up everything and we're going to train you. And then if you want to customize it after that, we can. But it's to hit that kind of price point and that deployment window Salesforce really wants. It's kind of like a quick start. Like some people would call it a quick start, but it's really packing up all the things that we literally put a team together and said, okay, what would be the ideal Shell Black wealth footprint of an implementation that has all the best practices, so they're set up to grow and scale and be successful. And that's how that came about. It was really just to kind of condense the deployment by reducing the consulting discovery time, because again, they can't even give us requirements because they just don't know what they don't know.
And that makes a lot of sense. And the people who are listening, probably not even doing financial services, any industry or cloud, the best practices, I think the advice is golden. You can condense them into accelerators or maybe apps. And that might not bring as much revenue as a full-fledged implementation, but maybe small clients, 10, 20, hundreds of them. I think it's a good business.
Yeah. And I think you also kind of have to know a little bit about the wealth management space in the United States. There are about 15,000 firms, or RIAs, registered investment advisors. 95% of them are tiny, like
Okay.
tiny meaning, and I'll define it as single digit number of employees. And yeah, so you have maybe the top 500 or top 1,000 out of that 15,000 that can really afford Salesforce and has the scale. And there's a lot of industry reports about what wealth firms are using for CRM. I attend about 3 different wealth conferences a year just to stay close to my clients and try to understand who my audience is and what's important to them. And what we found looking at some of this industry data is the firms that are small, which is the vast majority of them, use products like Redtail or Wealthbox, and they're more of an app. Very
Okay.
little custom options. And that's because if you're a small firm, you're doing IT, you're doing marketing, you're an advisor, they're doing everything. They don't have time to configure an enterprise level CRM. And so in the small firms, other CRMs dominate. Salesforce does not dominate the low end.
Sure.
Where the tipping point happens, where Salesforce is more than 50% market share, is when you get to about 20, 25 employees, and you start to have a dedicated IT person, and they're more growth minded, and FSC starts to solve problems as a platform that these other CRMs, which are more like plug and play apps, can't solve. And so when they have multiple office locations and your routing work and queuing work, when you're starting to use the CRM as more of a data hub and you need API access and third-party apps and integrations, then Salesforce becomes kind of the vendor of choice. But again, it's completely shoved on the high end of the space. And those are the clients that we chase, right? Because those are the ones that are growing and really have the revenue to make investments in Salesforce. But the small end, like I said, 95% of the industry, it's hard for them to buy Salesforce. And to give you an idea of how compressed that distribution of wealth firms, I was at a wealth conference a couple of months ago, and they said for every dollar being invested through a wealth management firm into the market, 70 cents of every dollar is being captured by the top 300 firms out of those 15,000. So
Oh,
there's a bunch of massive firms and there's just thousands of small firms. So that's I guess a pro tip is know the total addressable market, know your audience, know who you're chasing, and know what your persona of where you can add value, right? So we really know that customer base really well. Again, we've worked with 400 firms. We're definitely know who our target audience is.
right. The transition is interesting, but before we go there, many of the people must be wondering what RIA is. Can you give a very quick rundown? I mean, the full form I know, but I would like to get you can say 2-line or 3-line narration from you. What really RIAs do?
What do they do?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you are in that growth earning years, right? Maybe you're 30 plus and you're starting to accumulate a good salary, and you want to invest that for retirement, right? And a wealth advisor is someone who will put a plan together of how you can hit your financial goals by whatever date you want to retire, whether that's investing in your 401k, whether it's putting money in a low cost ETF or mutual fund or whatever. And they're, it's also can be more holistic planning about, do you have enough, life insurance and some other things, but it's really to make sure that you have, financial peace, that everything has been covered, that all your financial concerns, so when you get older, that you've kind of got that nest egg that you need to survive when you're not working, right? So it's It's financial planning. It's again kind of working on retirement, but it could also be, hey, I'm really rich and I want to give it all away and I need to help with charitable giving, or I want to put a trust together for, inheritance for my kids. It's all those kind of financial concerns. So when you get to a certain age, you're not surprised and
So
you're
is it
set up.
like household and high net worth individuals, or is it corporations also, which they serve like?
Mostly individuals. They do trusts, which is really a business entity that has a tax ID of its own. But I would say the vast majority, over 90%, are just individuals and households that are just needing their money invested and hoping for some type of a return based on their risk tolerance, how aggressive they want to be, to make sure they have kind of financial independence and freedom at a certain age. And so what that financial planner does, that wealth advisor does, is really look at where they're at today, try to figure out what that savings investment strategy needs to be based on the risk tolerance, and put a plan together. Make sure it's diversified. Like you're not buying just Tesla stock or something like that, but you've diversified all those if the market goes up or down, in different segments, large cap, mid cap, overseas, domestic investments that they're have a high probability of hitting that investment goal.
Right. And these are registered investment advisor. That means there is a regulatory body in US. Not everybody can do that, right? To let
Correct.
people invest their money.
Yeah,
So how
it's public.
complicated that?
So yeah, so it's like a RIA is registered investment advisor. So they have to register, and they get audited, and there's compliance standards and fiduciary standards that they have to hit to make sure that they're not putting people in high commission products that are, they're making investments not and fiduciary is basically making investments in the best interest of the client, not in the best interest of the advisor to make more money. Right. So they have a fiduciary responsibility to their clients to do the right thing based on their risk tolerance and where they are. So they're not just trying to, maximize revenue off those clients. It's that's why they call it fiduciary.
Perfect, perfect. I think now let's move to the main thing. You talked about the smaller RIAs, and now what I think found on your website is Baron has a report where I think you're serving what 40 to 50% of top 20 RIAs and logged what 100,000 consulting hours with them. So
Yeah.
tell us about that and how was that journey like, and what is the typical pain point or sticking point of these elite RIAs? We talked about the small ones.
That's a great question. So Barron's is kind of an industry source, journal source. And they track the top advisors, and they track the top wealth firms. So when we talk about the Barron's top 100 RAs, the rating or the ranking of the top 100 is based on what they call AUM, and it stands for assets under management. So it's really how much wealth, how much money does that firm manage? And
Mm-hmm.
it's in the billion, right? So we have clients that manage over 150 billion of
Mm-hmm.
assets for their clients. So when we talked about the small firms not being a really good fit for Salesforce, and then the bigger firms, that's really who we're chasing is the bigger firms that definitely understand the value of IT. They have dedicated IT departments. And so today, and this is after many years of working in the wealth space, 40% of the Barron's largest 20 firms have been or are Shell Black clients. So those are the big logos that people know in the space. And then, and the second question I think he has is like kind of what's different. What are the pain points of the big firms versus
What's a
small
special
firms?
request or picking points or whatever you call with the light people?
Yeah, once financial services cloud is implemented, I mean, the number one thing we work on is processes and workflows and driving efficiency. As a firm grows, there's usually an advisor and there's some kind of back office, middle office staff that's doing all the busy work, all the paperwork to open accounts and doing the trades and that kind of stuff. And as firms grow, they don't want to add a back office person for every advisor. It's just not efficient, right? It's just too costly to kind of build this army, a one-to-one army. And so when you get into firms that have multiple locations, I've talked about it, routing work and queuing work, it's all about operational efficiency. The other things that stand out with the bigger firms is they start adding other lines of business. So a smaller wealth firm might do financial planning, but they don't do tax preparation. And they would say, well, here's a CPA, certified public accountant, that can help you with your taxes because we don't do that. Or they say, here's an insurance broker to get disability insurance because we don't do that. Or here is an attorney, a lawyer, to help with your will and estate planning because we don't do that. The bigger firms are bringing all those services in house
Mm-hmm.
and they're a one-stop shop. And so they're capturing the revenue of those other lines of business, but they're also cross-selling. So the CPA line of the business is now identifying, because they're doing the tax returns, they can identify the high net worth clients and say, hey, you need a tax strategy or you need a wealth advisor, and they're introducing them to the other side of business. So it becomes the big firms have a half dozen or more lines of business. They're all cross-selling their products and services, and they're literally a one-stop shop, right? So instead of referring out to a network of what they would call a COI, center of influence, an outside
Mm-hmm.
attorney, an outside CPA, an outside insurance broker, and losing that revenue, they're capturing all that in house, and that's what the bigger firms are doing. Is they're really kind of a one stop financial shop for their clients.
And
And then
how
I
much
would
of that
say
is supported? Mm-hmm.
I would other say that there's also the ultra high net worth, and how you define that could be 10 million or more in revenue. There's different definitions of that, but there's services like a family office where
Mm-hmm.
there are wealth firms that are out there. We have a wealth firm today that has one client, which is one
Mm-hmm.
family. They just
Mm-hmm.
invest all the lots of money for that big family. So that's called a family offices, and a family offices gives services like, we'll negotiate your real estate purchases, we'll manage your employees, they'll do pretty much anything. So
Okay.
uh, they'll negotiate your contracts. So there's a whole slew of services that are available to the wealthy for these bigger firms. So sorry to interrupt you there.
No, no, no worries. I think this is really good information. Only thing I'm trying to understand is now I see like, okay, there is a small RIA which is doing just as you said, like let's say insurance only or a given set of mutual fund or maybe a given set of investment strategy. Then there is a big one which is trying to do all sort of streams and trying to cross sell. And then there is a family office. So how much of that is supported by financial services cloud and how much do you customize?
Yeah, great question. So financial services cloud, for the folks that don't know, covers every industry. So it's got
Mhm,
banking, it's got insurance, it's got asset management, it's got wealth management, mortgage, lending. And that is Salesforce's, if you're in financial services, that's our product.
mhm,
When you get that product, you absolutely have to customize it because under the covers, all those objects are there, right?
mhm.
So we have to turn off the stuff that doesn't apply and then build out the stuff that does apply. So it's not like you're buying the wealth management version of Financial Services Cloud. You are buying the only version of Financial Service Cloud.
Oh.
Tailor it for that business because all those objects are really, it's just one giant, think of it a big giant managed package.
So you got a lot of
Uh,
modules and you have to then turn on, turn off, and then fine tune the turned
yep.
on modules. Okay.
And then when we get work with the bigger firms, we have to customize it for those different lines of business. So those different lines of businesses have different sales processes. They have different support needs, different products. Um, there may be compliance security requirements that are different. Like this side of the business cannot see the book of business of this other line of business because we have to have separation, even though there's a common database with a CRM. We might have to put some walls in there. So as you add more services, there absolutely is more customization because the business processes are unique or bespoke for those different lines of business. And you have to just keep, whether it's record types or whatever, just keep building that out. So um, it's not a one size fits all. Financial Services Cloud does not address all those lines of business out of the box. You have to tailor it for how that RIA works every time.
Got it. Got it. And if again I come back to the original thing, Elite RIAs, they got a big financial services cloud. You tuned the module, turned on, turned off. What still is their biggest pain point, which is common to all of them?
Yeah. And I mentioned this before. Once you've done the implementation, the next thing that, say it's a single office location, all the employees work at one location. It's still business process and automation and workflows. It's trying to be
Mm,
efficient. Health management is a very high touch personalized business, lots of activity management, as you can imagine, a lot of client meetings, a lot of tasks, a lot of paperwork. So there's a lot of behind the scenes work that happens outside of a conversation between a client and the wealth manager to make that happen. They're having meetings. They're trying to understand the goals. They're saying, okay, for this client, we're going to have our annual meetings. So we have to report on back to our client, like, how did our investments do? Did we reach our goals? Did we not reach our goals? And so there's a lot of things that they're tracking. Um, uh, Wealth management, as you can imagine, there are a lot of custom fields on the account and the contact record because they track so much. It's so high touch. So it's really that activity management and workflow and automation and business process. That's what they want to get better at, because it's all about the performance and service level they can deliver to their client. And that's what they want to
Okay.
drive beyond.
Right. Right. I was just thinking one thing, like these discussions with the clients, they're very sensitive at times, especially in India. I know that many people invest via other ways around. So there is not everything which you can document, especially in a Salesforce kind of system. So do you see that kind of challenges, that they don't want a full transparency? Or people are comfortable, no, we will log everything, we'll let everything be audited. And how's that kind of compliance there?
So are you saying, I guess, well, most, and I'm not sure I'm answering your question. So most wealth firms don't have a Salesforce portal for their clients to put in there. And I think from a compliance standpoint, they're very conscious of what they're putting into CRM, right?
Okay. So
Because,
yeah, so let me
and I
rephrase
will
this
tell
question. Yeah, because what happens in India is people hack around the investment. They make investments via shady ways at that times, and they don't want to document it. They do that. There's a black and white component, and so much. So, how much hesitant are people onboarding to these kind of systems, which can be, or is this like in US a little different because of SEC and different bodies that you have to?
yeah, it's, I don't think we have as much besides crypto, maybe, where people are kind of doing their own thing. And then I will say there is a platform called Robinhood where people are on their phone making their own investment choices, right? So
True, true.
you don't have to go through a financial advisor, right, to get into the
Mm.
market, right? You can get into the market on your own. You can go up, open an investment account and make your own trades, and people day trade and stuff like that. I think, well, I don't know. So I don't know how they do the reporting and their finances, and I don't know what
No,
Robinhood
I'm
reports.
talking about from the investment advisor. Like typically in India, we have people who set the money. Set money, I means they invest some money in legal ways and some off the hook ways also. So not everything is documentable. So I was just wondering how much hesitant are investment advisors to bring all their kind of client conversations into Salesforce. This is just a fun side
Uh,
question, just out of curiosity.
yeah, no, I would say from a financial transaction standpoint, everything is documented and transparent in a wealth firm. There's nothing on the side that I would think is they wouldn't last. They could lose their license, right? And you can actually,
Okay,
there's a website called FINRA Check where you can check to see if your advisors actually had a black mark for doing something you weren't supposed to do. And that's a public
okay,
website. So yeah, you can go check them to see if they've ever been caught doing something they're not supposed to do. So there's a lot of penalties for not doing that. I will say AI in compliance has been a very interesting conversation in the wealth management space. What AI do you want to have in your CRM when you're dealing with financial information? And how much of that information do you want to go outside of the CRM to go to an AI service? And so that's been a very interesting conversation that I've been watching at a lot of the trade shows and with my clients of, what's their comfort level from a compliance standpoint to have AI working on their client data. So that's still a conversation that's
what's
in
the
process.
realistic usage you have seen so far? Like what your clients are comfortable with, emails or basic thing or something more deep?
Generative AI is the number one. It is summarizing a meeting with your client, getting the to-dos and the action items. That is the number one, is saving that advisor the time of spending 45 minutes after the call trying to organize their notes and get it in the CRM, right?
Right.
That is the use case that people are using. There's Zeppelin, Jump AI. There's Bitnas. There's a handful of industry-specific AI tools
Mm-hmm.
that are using with Salesforce and Redtail and Wealthbox and other wealth-specific CRMs to do that. So what I would call a point solution, very few firms. We've got some large firms looking at Salesforce AI, but most, and I'm being categorical here, maybe 90% of them don't want to build it. They just want an off-the-shelf plug and play point solution. So most wealth firms are using an off-the-shelf solution like a Jump AI or a Zeppelin to do that kind of generative AI and meeting summary and follow-ups and case prep.
Got it. Got it. And generative AI, probably because it's the safest of all, there is no harm. You will see the meeting summary or maybe generate an email before sending, but nothing beyond that which you have seen, like to touch the real data, do some reporting on that.
I have not seen a wealth firm yet. I mean, there's demos that Salesforce has done for a financial services use case where Salesforce kind of paints this picture of, here's all your investments and here's all the targets you want your portfolio to look like. And as the market goes up and down, there's what's called drift, where if you want to have a 15% weighting in this and a 5% weighting in this, but as the market moves, those percentages move, right? And so you could have AI summarizing all those investments and say, hey, you had a target of this. I see that you're too much now in large cap domestic and you need to rebalance your portfolio based on the market moves. So Salesforce is painting a very broad picture, but most of it is very tactical. Predictive AI, generative AI. Predictive AI is, what should I be doing with my client next? What's the next
Right.
best? But I would say even more so than predictive AI, generative AI is the big win right now, where an advisor in a wealth firm sees the value instantly, and because it has
Right.
so many conversations with their clients, and making sure that conversation doesn't get lost and it gets put in the CRM, and they can say, yes, I want these tasks or to-do items created from that conversation. So yeah, that's been the big win so far for wealth firms.
Right. So generative side of Agentforce is successful so far, in summary.
They're not using, I have clients that are
They're using third
dabbling
party.
in Agentforce, but they're using off-the-shelf point solutions. 95% of the time, they're not using Salesforce's version of Agentforce.
Even if they are Salesforce customers.
And we have some huge ones, and they're looking at it. And a stat that I heard, and I wish I could remember the source, but Salesforce is saying I think they have 6,000 customers using Agentforce.
Right.
There was another, gosh, I wish I knew the media source, but it was basically saying 80% of those are proof of concepts. They're not in production with clients.
Oh,
So
we have
I
seen
have a lot
something
of
like
clients
that
that are,
also. Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of clients looking at it because they don't want to get behind and they want to know what it can do and not do. But in terms of things production, I am not seeing Salesforce Agentforce in production. The other thing is, you don't want a chatbot doing a financial transaction. You want a human in the loop, really in the loop.
Right, right.
Making that financial transaction. Wealth is so high touch again that it's going to be really hard for them to just push that client base to a very smart chatbot. I think it's all going to be internal use cases. I don't want to be categorical. I can imagine most of the use cases for Agentforce will be internal because they don't want to
Right.
risk a hallucination or something like that with a client.
Right, right. I thought so, like meeting transcripts and generating email before sending, probably that will be with Salesforce AI. But if that's not also the case, that's actually very interesting. But I do see their concern also.
Yeah, there's a lot of firms that want it, but again, if we remember that demographic, it's probably only the top 500 wealth firms out of 15,000 that have a dedicated IT department.
Right,
Right.
right.
So
Then they need somebody to answer the questions and do those things also.
yeah, and even if you're in the top 500 firms, the number one competitor against Salesforce is Microsoft Dynamics, right? So
Okay,
not every firm in the top 500 has Salesforce. Some of them
okay.
have Advisor Engine, Dynamics, Tamarack, Salentica. There's other CRMs for the big
Specialized
boys.
products, right.
Yeah, so it's not like Salesforce. Salesforce has 50% market share of the big firms, but it's not 100. So you got to think of, okay, now we're talking maybe 250 firms of the 500 that have a dedicated IT department. Now, do they make the choice of buy an off-the-shelf solution, or do they want to spend internal resources working with Agentforce or work with someone like us to do that? But so far, I've seen the more demand off the shelf solutions like a Jump.ai or a Zeppelin. So
Got it.
Salesforce has got work to do in that space because the other ones have got all the common use cases out of the box and compliance configurable. So,
Right.
do you want that meeting note retained or not? Or do you want that voice recording retained or not? It's really easy because it's all configurable.
That's what I was
So,
trying to say before, that because at times there are conversations you won't want to log in the system. So
mm,
especially in the investment scene, you might talk something very, very sensitive.
gotcha. I
So
see your point. And I think a lot of those solutions have the option of whether they want that to go into CRM or not. So yeah, it's kind of like you don't want to have trade information going across on a text outside of a monitored channel. You need to have those
right,
conversations in
very
email or
private.
something that's being monitored. Yeah. So I see your point.
Right, right. And I think the one last bit beyond AI is this is a very, very regulated and very sensitive industry. Do you see any outsourcing challenges or going beyond US challenges? Like, do you have to be in the same uh, country and geography to do and financial services cloud work?
We've made the choice to be domestic United States only.
Mhm,
The main reason for us is, and this may be me listening to my attorney too much, is that our agreements in the US won't hold up outside of the US. You'd have to have other agreements for every country that would hold up in that court of law. So for
mm,
us, it's just not been an emphasis. I've made the conscious choice just to stay in the United States. When we work with Salesforce, there's about 8 offices across the US that have financial services team. There are some folks in Toronto, Canada that sell into the US. That
mhm.
for whatever reason, there's a Toronto office that works with US customers, but we're not working with Salesforce account executives outside of the US. I've just made the choice to stay domestic.
Right, right. This is perfect. I think we are moving towards the end of the conversation. One very interesting bit which I saw on your website is you claim that you avoid common pitfalls in FSC product. And I think these pitfalls change year by year. Like 2020, there must be something else. Now 2025, what is the number one pitfall do you see in the FSC domain?
Um, I think what I still see, and I'm kind of surprised I still see it, is there are other partners that are implementing FSC. They're a generalist. They say they can do it, and they end up setting up the data model completely wrong. I don't know how to quantify a lot, but we do quite a bit of cleanup projects where someone went, I hate to say, with a low bidder, and they said that they knew. It'd be like I wouldn't bid on a health cloud project because we wouldn't even know the questions to ask. Right? We're
Right.
just so a financial services cloud, but there are partners that will say yes to anything, as you know, or maybe not even a partner. And so we run into orgs that are just a complete mess and literally not even functional. And to the point where we've had to ask Salesforce to completely reset the org and wipe it and start for fresh and reload the
That's
data
easy
because
to do. Right.
it's more cost effective for the client. And I hate to say that they threw their money away, but that's that's still a surprising amount of problems I see is just FSC implemented wrong. They just don't understand the data model, and then we're rewiring it.
I think that's a scale which multiplied with the specialized cloud, like Sales Cloud. We saw this problem. I think you also seen that anybody came and they did anything and everything which they knew with their limited knowledge. And now with this specialized cloud, I think the damage is bigger probably. Same with app exchange apps. People don't know how to build a secure app and they did it anyhow.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it doesn't happen super often, but if something comes across our desk that's just not a good fit for it, we have kind of a network of partners that we know, right? To say these folks are really good at CPQ for manufacturing. These folks are really good at nonprofit. These folks are really good at health cloud. You're gonna have a much better experience. This is and it could be like an old client goes to a new industry and calls us like, "Hey, you did my old company. Can you do health cloud?" Like, no, it's not what we do. It's just again, it's just we wouldn't even know the right questions because we're just not industry experts. And to your
Yeah,
point,
we have no depth, right?
have
Yeah.
to be special, not have to be, but it if you're a generalist, you're really doing a lot of clients a disservice because you're just not giving. You don't have the experience to know the best practices. So it's
True.
just a problem with so many products. Again, when 60 plus acquisitions later, you just can't be an expert in everything.
Yeah, one has to choose the things, that's for sure. Okay, so now I think we're coming to the last bit, and this is little less Salesforce. So you have, I think, spent a lot of time in leadership, not just with Shell Black, but before that also. So how do you want to like educate new leaders or young entrepreneurs? Like, what's the key leadership lesson which you have for us?
I think this is consistent across my work career as a manager or an owner or a leader, and it's people selection. You and I are in the people business. People are our product, right? We sell code, we sell apps, we sell solutions, but it's people, right?
Hmm.
So having the right person in the right role is key. And I'll kind of tell a story, but when, right during the pandemic, and you may have experienced this as well, being a partner, talent was really hard to find, right?
True.
Incredibly challenging, very competitive to find talent. Now that Salesforce's growth has slowed, not so much. But we were adding people to the team that looked great on LinkedIn and they interviewed really well, but for whatever reason just didn't fit with our team. And we and I was with an owner's, it's called EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, back then. And a tool that I found was a thing called Culture Index. And it's basically a quick survey you can do on an applicant, and you can kind of see, based on their personality and their skills, is that a good fit for your organization? And it's not the be all end all. It's not the number one data point. It is just a data point that you can help look at on top of experience, on top of skills, to see if they may be a good fit for your organization. So people is the answer, but it's also making sure they're fit culture wise with your organization. People all want to work with all stars, right? So how do you
Right.
add something that doesn't become a burden and is a top performer and carries their weight, but also plays well and nice with each other, right? That
Right.
understand
Right.
how to be part of a team. So people selection is key, right? I
Right.
think, especially in our industry, our product is our people, and the best people we can find and hold within our organization is really the key to success. And I found that over and over and over again, is trying to get the right people in the organization.
Right. Right. Totally agree on the people part. You mentioned an interesting tool, and that again in COVID times. So that must be non-AI based also. What was the tool called? Culture Index.
It's called Culture Index.
Okay.
It's a subscription,
Hmm.
but I got exposed to it again through contacts at EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, and we've had it now for 4 or 5 years, and it has been spot on. It is creepy spot on because we surveyed our entire team, right?
Okay.
We surveyed the population of our own company to understand what personas, what profiles were a good fit for this type of software technical consulting type work. It also tells you which profiles are good for sales, right? Salespeople are not good consultants. Completely
True.
different
True.
profile. Salespeople are very high energy, very social, may not be a good, programmer. So,
True. True.
so we
So
did our
this
own
tool basically interviews all your team members. Do you have to pass it them
yeah. So
to
they all
fill up
get
a survey?
surveyed.
Okay.
Yeah, we all got surveyed, and then I took my entire management team to training so we could
Okay.
understand how to read these profiles. And as we were interviewing candidates, all the candidates that we interviewed had get
Oh, you fill
surveyed
in
by
their
Culture
data there.
Index,
Oh,
and
nice.
my management team can has been trained to kind of understand the data, and it's helped my management team understand how to interact with each other because we all share our profiles, so they know,
Personalities
okay,
and
show
different
likes
things.
to be
Yeah.
talked. Maybe you have a person that like just give me the facts, very direct. I don't
Ah,
need the stories about your family. I just need to know what I need to do and go let me do it. That's a different profile.
right. Right,
right?
that happens. Somebody wants to talk about family and things and then talk about what other guys here. Let's come to the point. Let me do my thing. So totally relate to that
Yeah.
thing.
There's people who are very process oriented. Think of an assembly line worker. I put this part in, I put this part in, I put this part in, and then you interrupt that person and they can't recover. They have to go back to step
Right.
one, step two, step three,
Yeah. I was
because
reading
they
there.
can't.
Yeah.
So it's
Sorry.
very helpful to kind of understand how to interact. And so our management team has all been trained to understand. And this is, I mean, I feel like we've got the best team that we've ever had in 15 years, but it's just a maturity that we've come to. And then we've realized, post pandemic, that culture is super important and people really need to feel like, work is somewhere they can enjoy working with, enjoy the people they work with, and communicate well. So it's been a very deliberate thing that I've introduced to the company to just make sure we have the kind of the best team to set us up for success. But it's been very deliberate.
Right. Right. I think every business owner, please take a note. Culture index. I will also check it after this podcast. And the last question here is: you are 6 time or 7 times Dreamforce speaker. What does Dreamforce means to you before and now in 2025?
I think for me, Dreamforce was always about reconnecting relationships. We've known each other for a decade, right? We were,
True.
I think, we may have been in the same MVP class, right?
Yeah, I
So,
think 2010 or
uh,
11 I forget.
yeah. And so that's how I met you, right? And
Right.
so these are decade long lasting relationships. And I love going to Dreamforce and reconnecting with that group. They've shared a lot. I've shared a lot, but I think just getting the FaceTime and reconnecting with that kind of community family. And we're, as you said at the beginning, we're OG. We're old school.
Original
So it's
gangster.
original gangster, right? So those folks are the ones that are kind of my class of
Hmm.
MVP. And when I was active, I'm a Hall of Fame, so I've been retired. I'm out to pasture at this point. But I think that those relationships that I've established in the community and being at Dreamforce, the late nights, drinking and just catching up, that's the best thing about Dreamforce for me, is just reconnecting with all the people that I've met in this journey.
Right, right. Because everyone is traveling from nearly every part of world. So it's a big window that way.
Yep.
Perfect. I think this is really helpful, Shell. I think we touched upon specialized cloud or industries and why this is important, and not being generalist, why it's not case anymore with so many acquisition. And then we took some really good business tips, and the whole conversation, I think, has a lot of depth. So thanks a lot for your time and hope to connect with you again soon. Any last words for the audience?
No, Abhinav, just great seeing you again. I'm sure I'll see you at Dreamforce, and thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Shell.
All right, take care.